The Brahms lullaby looping through the concealed speakers of the luxury Tribeca baby boutique was designed to soothe. Instead, it rang in my ears like a quiet, elegant funeral dirge. My hand hovered over a rack of cashmere onesies, the soft fabric brushing my knuckles, but I could not feel it. I could only smell it. Beneath the crisp, sterile scent of expensive baby powder and freshly unboxed linen, there it was, spun sugar and white musk, an omega scent. It was clinging tightly to the familiar grounding aroma of coastal pine and sea salt. The scent of Ethan, my alpha, my husband of 5 years. The scent that had lulled me through restless heats and the grueling first trimester of this pregnancy. Slowly, I turned the corner of the aisle. The world seemed to drop into a suffocating slow motion. Ethan stood near a display of imported Italian cribs. His hand, the same hand that wore a platinum wedding band matching mine, was spread wide and protective over the swollen belly of another man. The Omega leaned into his chest, laughing softly at something Ethan whispered. It was a picture of absolute sickening domestic bliss. I did not scream. I did not drop the cashmere onesie. I just watched the man I had built a life with, the brilliant Silicon Valley CEO who claimed he was stuck in back-to-back board meetings in Midtown, kissing the temple of his secret life. He did not choose between us, a quiet, terrifyingly calm voice whispered in my mind. He chose a long time ago. The cab ride back to our Tribeca penthouse was a blur of rain-streaked windows and muted city noise. Inside, the apartment was cavernous and impeccably silent. The sweeping views of the Manhattan skyline felt like a mockery. I did not cry. The grief had instantly crystallized into something hard, cold, and infinitely sharper. I walked into his private study. The heavy mahogany door clicked shut behind me. I booted up his desktop, my fingers flying over the keyboard with the precision of a surgeon. A spreadsheet. 5 years. The galas I attended as his trophy, the corporate crises I smoothed over with investors, the invasive IVF treatments, the heat cycles endured for his heir. Everything had a price. The laser printer whirred to life. The rhythmic sound was the only thing anchoring me to the room. I taped the pages together end to end until the paper cascaded over the edge of the marble kitchen island like a pristine white waterfall. A 2-meter-long invoice. At 7 p.m., the front door unlocked. The familiar click of the deadbolt sounded. Ethan footsteps echoed in the foyer, unhurried and confident. "Oliver, I am home, babe." His voice called out smooth and layered with that practiced alpha authority. Traffic was a nightmare. The board meeting ran completely off the rails. He walked into the kitchen, loosening his silk tie. He looked exactly the same as he had this morning, save for the faint, lingering trace of spun sugar on his collar. He stopped when he saw me standing by the island, a packed Rimowa suitcase resting by my feet. His eyes darted to the bag, then to my face, his scent spiking with sudden sharp confusion. "Ollie, what is going on? Are you going somewhere?" I did not answer. I simply pushed the incredibly long scroll of paper across the cold marble. It slid with a sharp hissing sound, stopping right at the edge of his fingertips. Ethan frowned, picking up the top edge. "What is this?" "An invoice," I said. My voice did not shake. It was barely above a whisper, yet it cut through the room like shattered glass. He read the first few lines, the color draining from his handsome face. Item 1. Acting fee for the role of perfect devoted partner for 5 years. Item 2. Public relations and image management. Item 3. Emotional and mental damages. Item 4. Surrogacy and gestation fee for the current 7 months. At the bottom, a heavily bolded grand total that reached well into the 8 figures. "Oliver, what is this insanity?" Ethan's voice trembled, the facade cracking. He stepped forward, reaching out. Did someone say something to you? I can explain." "I saw you." 3 words, dropped like an anchor. He froze. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I had ever heard. He did not deny it. He just stared, his jaw working as he tried to formulate the perfect calculated lie. It is not what you think," he stammered, running a hand through his hair. "It meant nothing. You are my mate, Oliver. You are carrying my child." "I am carrying my child," I corrected softly. I grabbed the handle of my suitcase. The wheels clicked sharply against the hardwood floor. "I have already contacted my lawyers. The divorce papers will be sent to your office on Monday. You have 30 days to settle that invoice before I dismantle everything you have built. You cannot do this." Ethan Alpha scent flared dark and oppressive, an instinctual command to submit. "I am your Alpha." I paused at the door, meeting his desperate gaze without a single ounce of warmth. "I release you." I stepped out, pulling the heavy door shut behind me. The heavy thud severed 5 years of my life in an instant. I dragged my suitcase toward the private elevator. My chest was tight, my breath finally catching in my throat as the adrenaline began to wane. The elevator chimed softly. The steel doors slid open. I froze. There was a man already inside. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in an immaculately tailored charcoal three-piece suit. Silver-rimmed glasses rested on the bridge of a sharp, aristocratic nose. He exuded an aura of absolute control, but it was his scent that made my omega instincts completely stall. Dark mahogany black pepper and something impossibly deep. An enigma. He looked at me. He looked at the heavy suitcase, my pale face, and the protective way my hand was resting over the swell of my stomach. He did not ask if I was okay. He did not offer pity. He simply stepped back, giving me a wide, respectful berth, and held the door open button with one long, elegant finger, a silent invitation to leave. I stepped inside. The doors closed, sealing us in a quiet, metallic hum. 10 minutes later, I was standing on the curb of the bustling Manhattan street. The cold New York drizzle fell over my shoulders, washing away the lingering traces of coastal pine. I looked up at the towering glass skyscrapers, the monuments of wealth built by men who thought they were invincible. I rested my hand over my belly. The baby kicked a soft, reassuring flutter. "We are not going to hide," I whispered to the rainy night. "We are going to collect every single cent." And right there, under the neon glow of the city, the broken club was born. The steady drumming of the Brooklyn rain against the massive, oxidized industrial windows sounded like a ticking clock. The loft I had leased in Dumbo smelled of old timber-wet concrete and the faint, bitter aroma of the decaf coffee I was nursing. It was a far cry from the filtered climate-controlled scent, neutralized air of the Tribeca penthouse I had abandoned 3 days ago. I stood by the glass looking across the East River at the Manhattan skyline. It stood tall and arrogant, a fortress of glass and steel built by men who believed they were untouchable. Men like Ethan, a fortress I was currently preparing to lay siege to. I walked back to the center of the vast, empty room. The broken club was now an officially registered LLC. However, at this exact moment, my grand empire consisted solely of a heavily pregnant Omega, a cheap folding table, a folding chair, and a laptop. Yesterday, I had bypassed traditional recruitment channels and posted a highly encrypted anonymous listing on a dark web financial forum. I was looking for a senior debt recovery specialist. The job description was vague, but the attached bounty was astronomical. I needed someone who did not care about corporate red tape. I needed a mercenary. 3 sharp, precise knocks echoed through the empty loft. It was not a tentative knock. It was a demand for entry. I straightened my spine, layered a mask of icy, untouchable indifference over my features, and walked over to unlock the heavy iron door. I pulled it open, and my breath hitched. It was him, the man from the elevator. He stepped into the dusty, drafty loft, looking as if he were walking into a senior partner office at Goldman Sachs. He wore a bespoke charcoal 3-piece suit that fit his broad shoulders with lethal perfection. His silver-rimmed glasses caught the dim light of the exposed bulbs above us, but it was his scent that truly commanded the room, a heavy, intoxicating blend of dark mahogany black pepper and aged bourbon. An enigma. Julian Nightfall, he introduced himself. His voice was a low, resonant baritone that bypassed my ears and vibrated directly in my chest. "I am here for the recovery specialist position." I did not ask how he had bypassed my encryption to find this physical address. I did not ask why a man who looked like he owned half of Wall Street was standing in a dusty Brooklyn warehouse. I simply turned, walked back to the folding table, and slid the 2-meter-long invoice across the cheap plastic surface. "This is the target," I said, keeping my voice flat and devoid of emotion. "He is a prominent Silicon Valley CEO. His assets are heavily diversified across offshore accounts, shell companies, and crypto portfolios. I want every single cent on this paper, and I do not care how you acquire it." Julian did not bat an eye at the absurd, deeply personal items listed on the invoice. He read the acting fee for the role of perfect partner, the emotional damages, and the surrogacy fee without offering a sickening look of pity. He simply pulled out a sleek matte black laptop from his leather briefcase, flipped it open, and sat down on the other side of the folding table. The rapid sound of his mechanical keyboard began. It was the only sound in the room cutting through the white noise of the rain. It was rhythmic, relentless, and strangely hypnotic. I sat across from him, trying my hardest to maintain the intimidating, ruthless posture of a criminal mastermind. But the reality of being 7 months pregnant was catching up to me. The dull, persistent ache in my lower back was making it nearly impossible to sit straight in the unforgiving folding chair. I let out a soft, tired sigh, shifting my weight and discreetly pressing a hand to my lumbar spine. Julian's fingers instantly stopped. He looked up, his dark, piercing eyes locking onto mine. "Your math is fundamentally flawed, Mr. Oliver." My eyes narrowed, my defensive instincts flaring. "Excuse me. You failed to account for compound interest over the 5-year period," Julian stated smoothly, his gaze dropping back to the screen. "You also omitted the emotional distress multipliers that are standard in high net worth dissolution settlements, as well as the current market slippage of his primary tech stocks. With my revised algorithmic valuation, Ethan owes you an additional $2.5 million. I stared at him, stunned by the cold, clinical way he monetized my trauma. "Can you actually collect it?" "I already have a back door into his decentralized exchange accounts," Julian said, his tone entirely conversational, as if we were discussing the weather. "I am freezing his primary crypto wallets as we speak. I am also routing a series of algorithmic microtrades to drain his liquidity pools. He will not be able to buy a cup of espresso by noon tomorrow without my explicit authorization." Before I could even process the sheer magnitude of the financial violence he had just casually executed, Julian closed his laptop and stood up. He walked over to the makeshift kitchenette I had set up in the corner of the loft. I watched, utterly bewildered, as this ruthless enigma, a man who had just financially castrated my ex-husband with a few elegant keystrokes, opened the mini fridge and took out a carton of pregnancy-safe milk. He poured it into a ceramic mug, placed it in the microwave, and watched the timer. When it beeped, he took it out and tested the temperature against the inside of his own wrist. He walked back and set the mug down in front of me. The ceramic clinked softly against the table. "Drink," he said quietly. "It is exactly 40 degrees Celsius, optimal for fetal digestion and mitigating maternal cortisol levels." I looked from the steaming milk to his unreadable, handsome face. My omega instincts, which had been jagged defensive and terrified of alphas for days, suddenly purred in absolute traitorous contentment. The scent of mahogany and pepper did not suffocate me. It wrapped around me like a heavy, protective blanket. I picked up the mug and took a sip. It was perfect. 72 hours later, my phone vibrated against the table. I picked it up and stared at the screen. It was a push notification from my highly secure offshore banking app. "Incoming wire transfer cleared." It was the exact amount on Julian revised invoice down to the last decimal point. I looked across the loft at Julian, who was deep into lines of code, completely unfazed by the multi-million-dollar heist he had just pulled off. I had posted an ad for a debt collector. I realized then, with a thrilling, terrifying jolt of adrenaline, that I had hired an apex predator. The crisp, relentless chirping of the Bloomberg terminal sounded. It was the new heartbeat of our Brooklyn loft. It had been exactly 1 month since Julian Nightfall walked through my door, and my empty industrial warehouse had officially transformed into a high-functioning, obscenely wealthy, and incredibly petty war room. The Broken Club was no longer just a concept. It was a fully operational syndicate. The rapid-fire sound of mechanical switches echoed from the corner desk. That was Leo, a brilliant 22-year-old cybersecurity prodigy and an Omega who had been unceremoniously dumped over a text message 2 weeks before his wedding. Currently, his monitor displayed the live feed of a luxurious smart home in Palo Alto. "Target smart home mainframe has been breached," Leo announced, an unhinged, delightful giggle escaping his lips, setting the bedroom Sonos speakers to maximum volume. Cueing Chopin Funeral March. Commencing playback at exactly 2 a.m. From the kitchenette, the aggressive whisking of a metal beater hitting a glass bowl provided the background rhythm. That was Toby, a Michelin-starred pastry chef and Omega who had lost his restaurant when his alpha ran off with their primary investor. "The vegan truffle pizzas are ready for dispatch to the Silicon Valley Executive Board meeting," Toby called out, wiping his hands on a flour-dusted apron. He smiled, a sweet, angelic curve of his lips. "I used an artisanal, organic laxative. It has a beautiful, earthy undertone. It will hit them right in the middle of their quarterly earnings call." I sat at the head of the long glass conference table, heavily pregnant, sipping my decaf tea and watching my beautiful, chaotic empire of broken hearts thrive. We were not just a support group. We were a weaponized hedge fund. While Leo and Toby handled the psychological warfare, Julian and I handled the slaughter. Status on Ethan Holdings, I asked, my voice cutting through the snickering and the whisking. Julian sat to my right, his posture immaculate in a navy bespoke suit. He did not look at the screen. He did not need to. He was a living algorithm. We are currently short-selling Apex Innovations by 3 million shares. Julian reported, his baritone voice sending a pleasant, grounding vibration through the air. I have orchestrated a series of dark pool trades to mask our position. The market has sensed the blood in the water. His stock price has plummeted 12% since the opening bell. The stock ticker above us flashed a vibrant, aggressive red, confirming Julian words. By 11 p.m., the loft finally quieted down. Leo had passed out on a beanbag chair, and Toby had gone home. The rain outside returned a soft, steady shushing sound against the glass panes, blurring the bright lights of the Manhattan skyline across the river. I was staring at a sprawling spreadsheet, rubbing the firm curve of my 7-month belly. The baby was restless tonight, kicking sharply against my ribs. I let out a quiet sigh, leaning my head back against the leather chair. A shadow fell over my desk. Julian set a fresh, steaming mug of chamomile tea in front of me. "You are overworking yourself," Julian said quietly. He did not hover, but he did not retreat to his desk either. He leaned his hip against the edge of my glass table, crossing his arms. "I'm just reviewing the liquidation margins," I deflected, refusing to meet his eyes. Working late with Julian had become a dangerous routine. The boundary between CEO and CFO was dissolving, replaced by a quiet intimacy that terrified me. Julian tilted his head, his silver-rimmed glasses catching the dim light. "Your emotional volatility is tracking unusually high this evening, Oliver." He noted, his tone entirely serious, but his dark eyes gleaming with something entirely different. "Should I be purchasing hedge insurance for my own heart, or is this just a standard market correction?" My breath hitched. I looked up, completely disarmed by the seamless way he wove Wall Street terminology into a flirtation. My portfolio is closed to new investors, Julian." A shame, he murmured, his voice dropping an octave. "I have a vast amount of capital I am looking to invest long-term." I swallowed hard, my omega instincts fluttering wildly, desperately reaching for the safety of his enigma scent. Before I could formulate a witty rebuttal, the reality of our schedule interrupted. "We have the Manhattan Financial Summit Gala tomorrow night," I said, abruptly changing the subject. "Ethan will be there, desperate to find new investors to stop the bleeding. We need to be seen. I need him to know who is holding the knife." Julian's gaze lingered on my face for a fraction of a second longer before he nodded seamlessly, slipping back into his professional armor. "I will arrange the transport." The next evening, the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was a sensory nightmare. The blinding rapid-fire flashes of paparazzi cameras assaulted my eyes the moment I stepped out of the Maybach. I wore a tailored midnight blue maternity suit designed to look like armor, but armor could not protect me from the overwhelming, suffocating wave of scents inside the venue. Hundreds of alphas and omegas, all broadcasting their ambition stress and heavy designer perfumes. It was a suffocating wall of pheromones. My pregnancy heightened my sensitivity to an agonizing degree. Suddenly, a wave of severe nausea crashed over me. The opulent chandeliers above seemed to spin. I stumbled, my hand flying to my mouth, the edges of my vision blurring. I cannot do this. I'm going to collapse in front of half of Wall Street. Before my knees could buckle, a solid, immovable wall of heat and muscle manifested in front of me. Julian. He did not grab me. He did not make a scene. He simply stepped directly into my personal space, positioning his broad shoulders between me and the flashing cameras. He subtly angled his body, creating a physical shield. Then he released his scent. It was not aggressive. It did not challenge the room. It was a deep, resonating hum of dark mahogany, crushed black pepper, and aged bourbon. An enigma, absolute dominance, perfectly controlled and directed solely at me. It washed over me like a tidal wave, instantly neutralizing the sickening cocktail of the ballroom, wrapping around my lungs and grounding my racing heart. The nausea vanished. My breathing stabilized. "Focus on me." Julian murmured, his voice a low, steady anchor in the chaos. He offered his arm an impeccably tailored sleeve of charcoal wool. "I have got you, Oliver. Walk with me." I looked at his arm, then up at his profile carved from marble and shadow. He was not just an employee. He was not just a mercenary. I slipped my hand through his arm, leaning into the warmth of his enigma scent, and together we walked into the lion den. A loud crash echoed as the heavy iron door of the Brooklyn loft violently slammed against the exposed brick wall. The sound shattered the quiet focus of the afternoon, echoing through the high ceilings like a gunshot. I flinched my hand, instinctively flying to protect the heavy 8-month swell of my stomach. Leo and Toby were out for a late lunch. The loft was supposed to be a fortress, but standing in the doorway, chest heaving and eyes bloodshot, was the nightmare I thought I had locked out. Ethan. He did not look like the polished Silicon Valley CEO who had graced the cover of Forbes. His bespoke suit was wrinkled, his tie was ripped off, and his hair was in disarray. But the most terrifying change was his scent. The comforting coastal pine and sea salt I once loved had turned sour, twisted into the sharp, aggressive stench of rotting wood and ozone. It was the scent of an alpha cornered and desperate. Ethan snarled his voice, a low, vibrating growl. The heavy soles of his leather shoes hit the concrete floor in rapid predatory succession. I stood up from the glass conference table, my heart hammering wildly against my ribs. How did you get past security? I still have the private investigators on retainer, Oliver. Did you really think you could hide a massive short-selling operation from me forever? He closed the distance between us, his eyes darting frantically around the array of Bloomberg terminals and whiteboards covered in liquidation algorithms. The Broken Club, a pathetic little revenge syndicate. You are destroying my company. Your company destroyed itself the moment you committed fraud, I said, forcing my voice to remain steady, though my hands were shaking. I grabbed the edge of the glass table to anchor myself. Stop the trades, Ethan commanded. It was not a request. He deliberately dropped his alpha pheromones, weaponizing his biology. The air pressure in the room plummeted. The oppressive, suffocating weight of an angry alpha scent slammed into me. My omega biology, already fragile and heavily burdened by the late stages of pregnancy, reacted violently. My knees buckled slightly. A sharp pulling cramp ripped through my lower abdomen, stealing the air from my lungs. I gasped, folding forward slightly. You are unstable. Oliver. Ethan stepped closer, his voice dropping into a cruel, calculated whisper. Look at you. You are running a criminal enterprise out of a warehouse. When I tell the judge about this, when I show them the financial terrorism you have orchestrated, you will never see our child. I will take the baby the moment it is born, and I will lock you away in a psychiatric ward. Take the baby. The words pierced through my panic like an ice pick. The cramp intensified, radiating down my back. I could not breathe. The room was spinning, drowning in the scent of rotting pine. Then the ambient temperature of the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. A low, terrifying vibration resonated through the floorboards. It was not a sound you could hear. It was a frequency you could feel in your marrow. It was pure, unadulterated dominance. The door to the server room opened with a click. Julian stepped out. He was not wearing his suit jacket. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar sleeves, rolled up to expose thick forearms. He slowly took off his silver-rimmed glasses, folding them with agonizing precision and slipping them into his breast pocket. His dark eyes were fixed on Ethan, completely hollow of mercy. And then Julian released his scent. It hit the room like a physical shockwave. The deep, intoxicating aroma of dark mahogany, crushed black pepper, and aged bourbon exploded outward. It was not just an alpha scent. It was an enigma. It utterly annihilated Ethan Oppressive Pine, swallowing it whole and wiping it from existence. Ethan choked. He literally gagged, stumbling a step backward as his hands flew to his throat. The biological superiority was absolute. Julian did not run. He walked. Each step was measured, silent and lethal. He bypassed me entirely, placing his towering muscular frame directly between me and Ethan. You are trespassing. Julian's baritone voice was eerily calm, contrasting the violent storm of his pheromones. Who the hell are you? Ethan gasped, fighting to stand straight under the crushing weight of the Enigma presence. This is between me and my mate. He is not your mate. He is my employer, Julian said smoothly. He reached into his trousers pocket, pulling out a sleek black USB drive and tossed it onto the glass table. It landed with a sharp clacking sound. I am his chief financial officer. And as of 5 minutes ago, my hedge fund, which possesses significantly deeper pockets than your pathetic tech startup, just executed a hostile takeover of Apex Innovations. Ethan's face went completely ashen. No, that is impossible. The board. The board sold you out to save themselves. Julian interrupted, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. We own 51% of the voting shares. You are no longer the CEO. You are unemployed. Furthermore, that drive contains the unencrypted logs of your offshore tax evasion. I have already scheduled an automated email to the IRS and the SEC. Julian took one final step forward, invading Ethan's space, looking down at the broken man. If you ever approach him again, if you ever breathe his name, or if you even look at a photograph of that child, I will not just bankrupt you. I will erase you from the global financial system. Now get out. Ethan looked from the USB drive to Julian and finally to me. He was completely stripped of his power, his wealth, and his pride. Without another word, he turned and fled toward the elevator, his footsteps echoing in a frantic, pathetic retreat. The heavy iron doors closed. He was gone. The oppressive Enigma pheromones instantly retracted, vanishing like smoke. The silence that rushed back into the loft was deafening. I could not hold myself up anymore. The adrenaline crashed, leaving behind a hollow, agonizing exhaustion. My legs gave out. Before I could hit the concrete floor, strong arms caught me. Julian pulled me up against his chest. He was warm, incredibly solid, and his scent had softened into a gentle, protective hum of aged bourbon and wood. He guided me back into the leather chair, kneeling in front of me. Oliver, look at me. Julian urged, his usually stoic mask completely shattered. His dark eyes were wide with genuine terror as his hands hovered over my trembling shoulders. Are you in pain? Is it the baby? Tell me where it hurts. I stared at him, tears finally breaking free and tracking hot paths down my cheeks. This ruthless, untouchable enigma, a man who had just dismantled a billionaire with a few sentences, was kneeling on a dusty warehouse floor, looking at me as if I were the most precious, fragile thing in the world. I am okay. I gasped, resting my hand over my stomach. The baby kicked a soft, protesting flutter against my palm. Just a cramp. He scared me. Julian let out a ragged exhale. Without asking for permission, he took off his suit jacket from the back of his chair and draped it over my shivering shoulders. He took my cold hands in his large, warm ones, holding them tightly. He will never touch you again, Julian whispered, his thumb slowly stroking the back of my knuckles. He looked up, his gaze locking onto mine with a fierce, burning intensity that had nothing to do with corporate takeovers. I swear to you, Oliver, I have got you. For the first time in 5 years, looking into those dark eyes, I actually believed it. The rhythmic, relentless pattering of the late November rain against the Brooklyn loft industrial windows sounded louder than usual today. It was a cold, dreary Tuesday, the kind of day that made the damp chill seep into your bones. But the chill radiating through my chest had nothing to do with the weather. It came from the glowing screen of my encrypted laptop. A secure file opened. Leo had sent me a file an hour ago with a single cryptic note attached. Boss, you might want to look at the actual net worth of the guy making your decaf. I stared at the digital pages of a highly classified dossier, my heart pounding a heavy, erratic rhythm against my ribs. There, glaring back at me from a 3-year-old unlisted Forbes profile, was Julian. He was not wearing his glasses, and his hair was styled with the sharp, ruthless precision of Wall Street royalty. The headline read, "The Phantom Heir, Julian Nightfall, abruptly exits the trillion-dollar Nightfall dynasty." He was not just an algorithmic genius. He was not a mercenary debt collector looking for a bounty. He was the sole heir to one of the most terrifyingly powerful financial empires in the Western Hemisphere. He possessed enough generational wealth to buy and sell Ethan Company 50 times over before breakfast. My hands resting over the heavy 34-week swell of my stomach began to tremble. Why was he here? Why would a man who could command the global markets from a penthouse in Geneva choose to sit in a drafty Brooklyn warehouse, writing liquidation code and checking the temperature of my pregnancy-safe milk? The toxic, lingering trauma of my failed marriage instantly provided the answer: pity. He had seen me in that elevator, a shattered, discarded Omega hauling a suitcase into the rain. He had witnessed my panic attacks. He had stepped in to save me from Ethan pheromone assault. To a man who had everything a broken, pregnant Omega seeking revenge was probably just an intriguing charity project. An obligation born out of an enigma misplaced sense of honor. The heavy iron door at the far end of the loft clicked open. The deep, grounding scent of dark mahogany black pepper and aged bourbon drifted into the room, cutting through the smell of ozone and rain. Julian walked in, shaking the water from his bespoke wool overcoat. He carried 2 paper cups from the artisanal cafe down the street. Without a word, he walked over to my desk and set the smaller cup down in front of me. Decaf Earl Grey, steeped for exactly 3 minutes. "The Asian markets are opening," Julian said, his baritone voice smooth and professional. He did not sit down immediately. He looked at my face, his sharp eyes catching the tension in my jaw. "You are pale, Oliver. Is the baby pressing on your spine again?" I looked at the tea. Then I looked at the heir to the Nightfall Empire. A sudden irrational wave of anger washed over me, anger at myself for letting my guard down, for actually believing I could be seen as an equal, for terrifyingly falling in love with him. "Why did you close our short position on Apex Innovations at 4%? I demanded, my voice sharp, completely ignoring his question. I closed the dossier on my laptop with a loud snap. We had Ethan on the ropes. If we held for another hour, we could have triggered a margin call. Julian paused, his brow furrowing slightly. The market volatility was too high. The algorithm flagged a potential short squeeze. I mitigated the risk to protect our capital. I did not hire you to mitigate my risks. I snapped, my voice rising. I pushed the tea away, the cardboard cup scraping harshly against the glass table. I hired you to destroy him. We are a revenge syndicate, Julian, not a conservative pension fund. You are acting irrationally, Julian replied, his tone remaining infuriatingly calm. I am managing this portfolio to ensure long-term stability for you and your child. A reckless margin call could have exposed you to unnecessary liabilities. I will not allow you to take that gamble. You will not allow me. I stood up, pushing my chair back. The sudden movement sent a dull ache through my pelvis, but I ignored it. Who do you think you are? Do you think because you are Julian Nightfall, heir to a $1 trillion throne, you can just swoop in and micromanage my life? Julian froze. The absolute stillness that overtook his large frame was terrifying. So Leo breached the family firewalls, Julian murmured, his voice dropping into a dangerously low register. I assumed it would happen eventually. Is this a game to you? My voice cracked, the betrayal and insecurity finally bleeding through my aggressive facade. Are you just bored? Did you look at the pathetic, pregnant Omega in the elevator and decide I was a fun little charity case, a broken toy you could fix out of pity? Julian slapped his large hands down onto the glass conference table. The impact rattled the monitors and sent a few drops of tea spilling over the rim of the cup. I flinched, my breath hitching in my throat. He did not release his alpha pheromones to submit me. He did not need to. The sheer raw emotion burning in his dark eyes was paralyzing. Pity, Julian breathed, his chest heaving under his tailored vest. The stoic, unshakable CFO was gone. You think I walked away from my family empire to sit in a warehouse out of duty? Then why? I yelled back, a tear finally spilling over my lashes. I am a divorced Omega with a vendetta. I am carrying another man-child. I am the worst possible investment you could make. I do not protect you out of duty, Oliver. Julian's voice tore through the room, desperate and fiercely uncompromising. He leaned across the glass table, his face inches from mine, his enigma scent flaring not with dominance, but with a terrifying, absolute vulnerability. I invest my entire existence into you because you are the most brilliant, resilient, and valuable asset I have ever encountered in my life. I am here because I cannot imagine being anywhere else. The silence that followed was absolute. The only sound was the heavy drumming of the rain against the glass and the ragged sound of our breathing. I stared at him, my heart stopped in my chest. He was not looking at me with pity. He was looking at me like I was his entire world. He slowly straightened up his eyes, never leaving mine. He looked at the space between us, the professional boundary that had just been irrevocably shattered. I am not here to fix you, Oliver, Julian whispered, his voice thick with an emotion I had never heard from him before. I am here because I want you. I stood frozen behind the desk. The fear was still there, but beneath it, something beautiful and undeniable was finally breaking free. The risk assessment was complete, and for the first time in my life, I wanted to go all in. The penthouse boardroom of Apex Innovations in Manhattan was a monument to corporate hubris. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a dizzying view of the city, but today, the gray winter sky felt like a heavy, suffocating ceiling. The air in the room was sterile, dry, and thick with the unmistakable metallic scent of absolute defeat. I sat at the head of the massive obsidian conference table, At 9 months pregnant, my center of gravity had shifted entirely, making the ergonomic leather chair feel more like a throne of exhaustion. But my posture was meticulously straight. Directly across from me sat Ethan. He was a ghost of the man I had married. The tailored Silicon Valley charm had evaporated, replaced by hollow cheeks, a trembling jaw, and a scent of rotting pine that he could no longer mask with expensive cologne. His board of directors sat in deafening silence along the sides of the table, their eyes darting nervously toward the towering figure standing exactly 1 step behind my right shoulder, Julian Nightfall. Julian wore a stark black suit today, the fabric absorbing the pale light of the room. He did not project his enigma pheromones to intimidate. His mere presence as the phantom heir of the Nightfall dynasty was enough to financially asphyxiate everyone in the room. He was my CFO, my shield, and the man who had systematically dismantled the empire of the man who broke me. Julian stepped forward, the soft thud of his Oxford shoes against the carpet sounding like a judge gavel. He placed a thick, leather-bound folio on the table and slid it precisely to the center. The hostile takeover is complete. Julian's baritone voice was smooth, carrying 0 inflection. This document finalizes the transfer of all remaining Tier A assets, intellectual property, and voting rights to the Broken Club LLC. Sign it, Ethan, or the SEC gets the unredacted files at exactly noon. Ethan stared at the document. His hand shook as he picked up the heavy Mont Blanc fountain pen. He looked up at me, his eyes wet, pleading for a mercy he never showed me. Oliver, Ethan whispered, his voice cracking. Please, I built this. I looked at him, feeling absolutely nothing. No anger, no grief, just the quiet, settling dust of closure. You built it on a foundation of lies, I replied, my voice steady and cold. Sign the paper, Ethan. The silence stretched. Finally, defeated by the inescapable gravity of his own choices, Ethan lowered his head. The pen touched the heavy parchment. The sharp scraping sound of the gold nib finalizing his ruin echoed in the quiet room. He pushed the folio back across the table. It was done. I had won. I had collected every cent, every ounce of pride, every fragment of power he had stolen from me. I placed my hand flat on the cool glass of the table, ready to stand up and walk out of his life forever. And then my world tore in half. A searing, agonizing pressure ripped through my lower abdomen, radiating violently into my spine. It was not a dull ache. It was a brutal, contracting vice. My vision whited out. I gasped a sharp, ragged sound that shattered the silence of the boardroom. My hand flew from the table to clutch the massive swell of my belly. A warm rush of fluid soaked through my tailored trousers. My water had just broken on the floor of my ex-husband-conquered boardroom. Panic exploded in the room. The board members leaped from their chairs. Ethan stood up, his face pale with shock, taking a hesitant step forward. Oliver, oh my God, the baby. He did not make it to the second step. Do not approach him, Julian roared. The stoic, untouchable enigma vanished. Julian moved with terrifying speed. He bypassed the table, shoving a heavy leather chair out of the way with such force it crashed into the glass wall. He did not care about the optics. He did not care about the hostile takeover. He only cared about me. Another contraction hit, tearing a choked sob from my throat. My knees gave out. I did not hit the floor. Julian's arms were already there, sweeping under my knees and behind my shoulders, lifting me effortlessly against his broad chest. His scent, dark mahogany black pepper and aged bourbon, flared with massive protective intensity, wrapping around my senses, fighting back the panic and the pain. Breathe, Oliver. Look at me, Julian commanded, his voice tight with raw, undisguised terror, yet anchoring me to reality. He turned on his heel, carrying me toward the heavy double doors. Clear the elevators now. The descent, the screaming sirens of the ambulance, the frantic rush through the sterile, blinding hallways of Mount Sinai Hospital. It was a kaleidoscope of pain, and Julian's unyielding grip. He never let go of my hand. He argued with doctors, his enigma presence commanding the entire maternity ward, refusing to leave my side for a single second. He was everything Ethan was not. He stayed. Hours later, the agonizing storm finally broke. The sharp, furious, beautiful cry of a newborn filled the delivery room. I fell back against the pillows, sobbing with sheer exhaustion and overwhelming joy as the nurse placed a tiny, warm, squirming weight onto my chest. A girl, Chloe. The bright hospital lights were dimmed. The chaotic beeping of the monitors slowed to a steady, peaceful rhythm. I looked up through my tears. Julian was standing beside the bed. His immaculate black suit was wrinkled, his tie was gone, and his sleeves were rolled up. The ruthless predator of Wall Street looked completely undone. His dark eyes were wet as he stared down at the tiny, fragile life resting on my chest. He slowly reached out his large, trembling finger, brushing against Chloe's microscopic fist. She instantly stopped crying, her tiny fingers wrapping instinctively around his knuckle. Julian let out a shaky exhale. He slowly lowered himself down, dropping to one knee beside the hospital bed. "Julian," I whispered, my voice hoarse. He did not pull a velvet box from his pocket. He did not offer a traditional script. He looked up at me, his eyes burning with an absolute, undeniable devotion. "The invoice has been cleared in full." Oliver, Julian said, his voice a low, emotional rumble. "The hostile elements have been liquidated. Your assets are secure." He gently took my free hand, pressing a kiss to my knuckles. His lips were warm, grounding. "But my portfolio is incomplete." He continued, his thumb tracing the blue veins on the back of my hand. "I have eliminated all the risks, but I do not want to walk away. I am submitting a proposal for a permanent merger. Unlimited liability on my end. 100% of the dividends go to you and Chloe. I do not want your shares, Oliver. I just want the right to be her father, and I want the honor of being your alpha." Tears spilled over my cheeks hot and fast. I looked at the man who had bought my debt and ended up earning my soul. I squeezed his hand, a wet, radiant smile breaking across my exhausted face. "The risk assessment is approved, Julian. I accept the merger." Julian closed his eyes, pressing his forehead against our joined hands as a ragged breath of pure relief escaped his chest. In the quiet glow of the hospital room, the contract was sealed, not with ink, but with a promise of forever. The late afternoon sun over Manhattan did not look like a battlefield anymore. It looked like a conquest. The golden hour light poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 85th floor of our Wall Street headquarters, casting long, warm shadows across the imported Persian rug. A vintage record player in the corner spun a low, smooth jazz vinyl, the saxophone notes floating through the climate-controlled air. A distinct clinking sound echoed. It was not the sound of mechanical keyboards ringing telephones or stock tickers. It was something far heavier and wonderfully absurd. I sat behind my massive mahogany desk, sipping a cup of rare, perfectly steeped Darjeeling tea. I lowered the quarterly earnings report and peered over the rim of my bone china cup. Down on the floor, my 2-year-old daughter Chloe was currently engaged in a highly complex architectural project. Her building blocks, however, were not made of plastic or painted wood. They were actual solid gold bullion bars. Beside her, sitting cross-legged on the outrageously expensive rug, was the Phantom Heir himself, the ruthless enigma who terrified global markets. Julian Nightfall had his pristine white dress shirt sleeves rolled up to his elbows, his silk tie discarded somewhere on the leather sofa. "Her structural integrity is fundamentally flawed," Julian muttered, adjusting his silver-rimmed glasses with absolute seriousness, as Chloe haphazardly stacked a 4th gold bar onto a leaning tower. "If we apply standard stress testing algorithms, this entire construct will experience a catastrophic failure within 10 seconds. "She is 2 years old, Julian," I reminded him, a genuine smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. "I do not think she is factoring in seismic market volatility." It had been 2 years since that chaotic day in the Mount Sinai delivery room. 2 years since the paper invoice became a permanent merger. The Broken Club was no longer a ragtag revenge syndicate operating out of a damp Brooklyn warehouse. We were a fully licensed, aggressively expanding hedge fund with a reputation that made Fortune 500 CEOs sweat through their tailored suits. Leo was now our chief information officer, currently terrorizing tech startups with his brutal cybersecurity audits. Toby had taken over our hospitality investments, turning his vengeful baking skills into a Michelin-starred empire that actively and legally refused reservations from known philanderers. And Ethan, I rarely thought of him. The last I heard through the financial grapevine, he was working as a mid-level logistics manager for a paper supply company somewhere in the dreary, forgotten suburbs of New Jersey. His offshore accounts had been seized, his legacy erased, and his alpha pride utterly broken. Karma was not just a spiritual concept anymore. It was a highly effective financial instrument we had deployed with lethal precision. Chloe squealed in delight as her golden tower inevitably toppled over the heavy bars, sinking into the thick carpet. She immediately reached her chubby little arms toward Julian's chest, demanding to be picked up. Julian's demeanor changed in a microsecond. The cold, analytical CFO vanished without a trace. He scooped her up with a soft, rumbling chuckle, his enigma scent, dark mahogany black pepper, and aged bourbon wrapping around the massive office in a gentle, protective wave. He pressed a kiss to her dark curls, looking at her with the kind of absolute, unconditional reverence most men reserved for deities. He stood up carrying her with effortless grace and walked over to my desk. He leaned down, placing a soft, lingering kiss on my lips. The familiar warmth of his scent grounded me instantly, as it always did. The European markets have officially closed. Julian murmured, his free hand resting gently on the back of my neck, his thumb stroking my pulse point. Your portfolio is up by 12%, and your daughter has successfully managed to depreciate $3 million of physical gold by scratching it against the floorboards. Should we call it a day, Mr. CEO? I leaned into his touch, my omega instincts purring in deep, unwavering contentment. I think we can afford the loss. I stood up, stepping out from behind the desk. As I looked at my family, the powerful, terrifying alpha who had given up a $1 trillion empire just to build a new one by my side, and the beautiful daughter who only knew a world of absolute safety, the final lingering ghosts of my past dissolved into the jazz music. For years, I had believed the lie that love meant endurance, that being an omega meant absorbing the pain, standing quietly in the shadows while your alpha conquered the world, and forgiving the unforgivable, because that was simply what society demanded. I looked at Julian, who was now listening intently, as Chloe babbled an incomprehensible string of toddler jargon, treating her nonsense with the utmost respect. Love is not endurance. Love is not a debt you pay with your tears. Love is finding someone who looks at your shattered pieces and recognizes their astronomical value. Love is the man who wields his power not to suppress you, but to obliterate the forces that try to hurt you. Love is a permanent, unconditional merger. Julian caught me staring. His dark eyes softened the corners of his mouth, lifting into that rare, devastating smile reserved exclusively for me. Ready to go home, Oliver. I reached out, taking his hand. Our matching platinum bands gleamed under the soft ambient light of the Wall Street skyline. I am already home, I whispered. The heavy mahogany doors of the office closed quietly behind us, leaving the golden towers scattered on the floor. We did not need to guard them. We had already acquired everything in the world that truly mattered.